My name is Claire Reynolds, and at 32, I thought I understood what family disappointment felt like. Being left out of Christmas was painful enough, but nothing prepared me for the shock of receiving a $52,000 bill for my younger sister Megan's new car. That was the moment something inside me finally broke. A decade of emotional manipulation and financial control had built up to this breaking point. This time, they had crossed a line they couldn't undo. So, I made a call that changed everything. If you're watching this from a holiday gathering, treasure those authentic moments with your loved ones. Please hit like and subscribe as I share how I finally stood my ground and redefined what family truly means. I grew up in a spacious four-bedroom colonial in Fairfax, Virginia, surrounded by lush gardens and a neat driveway that always held two luxury SUVs. On the surface, the Reynolds family looked like the picture of success. My father, Thomas, was a well-known real estate developer, and my mother, Caroline, was deeply involved in local philanthropic organizations. Everything about our life screamed privilege. But behind closed doors, love was conditional, measured by achievements and monetary value. From the day Megan was born, when I was just 5, the family dynamic shifted dramatically. Megan was their prized gem, striking, magnetic, and effortlessly charming in ways I never was. While I was serious and responsible, Megan was free-spirited and outgoing. My parents rewarded those traits in her and dismissed mine as boring or overly cautious. When Megan threw fits, they called her spirited and passionate. When I voiced my feelings, I was labeled difficult and overly sensitive. This double standard was the soundtrack of my childhood. Megan got weekly dance lessons, designer clothes, and a brand new BMW for her 17th birthday. For mine, I received a secondhand Toyota and a long talk about practicality and humility. Even asking for guitar lessons was met with sighs and comparisons to Megan's real talents. Despite this imbalance, I pushed forward. I graduated valedictorian of my high school class, earned a scholarship to the University of Virginia, and majored in finance. Megan, meanwhile, flitted from college to college, never finishing a semester. By 25, I landed a junior analyst role at a top Wall Street firm. By 30, I had bought my own condo in Manhattan, NYC, built a solid savings account, and lived independently of my family's shadow. But my success came with a price. Family events became stages for thinly veiled digs about my workaholic tendencies or obsession with money. The hypocrisy wasn't lost on me. My parents, who measured worth by luxury brands and elite memberships, criticized my ambition even as they quietly relied on me for financial favors. Then came the envelope. A formal invoice demanding I pay $52,000 for Megan's new car, an expense I was never consulted about but was expected to cover. That moment crystallized everything I'd endured. I refused to pay and made a call to a lawyer. What followed was the beginning of reclaiming my life from a family that saw me as nothing more than a wallet. It was painful, but it was necessary. If you've ever felt used or invisible in your family, know this: your worth isn't tied to their approval. Stand firm, set boundaries, and don't be afraid to walk away from toxic ties. Please share your thoughts in the comments below, and remember to subscribe for more stories about reclaiming strength and finding true family. Your support means everything. The exploitation started small and almost casual. Could I cover Megan's rent this month? Could I lend Dad some cash for a new real estate deal until his next payout? Could I chip in for Mom's charity gala since I was doing so well? Each ask came wrapped in the language of family, unity, and trust. Each time I agreed, the demands only grew larger. 3 years ago, I wiped out Megan's $15,000 credit card debt after she tearfully promised to get her finances under control. 6 months later, she maxed it out again, splurging on an extravagant trip to the Maldives. When I voiced my concerns, Mom pulled me aside with a sigh, telling me Megan just lived differently, and reminding me how lucky I was to have financial stability and a steady career. Last year, I ended up paying my parents' property taxes after they claimed to be short on cash, despite buying a new vacation condo in Florida that very same month. When I questioned this, Dad reminded me how much they had sacrificed for my education, which conveniently ignored the scholarships and student loans I had only recently finished paying off. Despite everything, I still longed for their approval and acceptance. This past September, I decided to try again to bridge the gap. I planned a weekend getaway in Arlington, my treat. I booked a suite at a boutique hotel, scored tickets to a play Megan had been dying to see, and made dinner reservations at a trendy restaurant she loved. The weekend went okay, mostly pleasant, though Mom spent much of it critiquing my condo's location and size, and Megan dominated every conversation with elaborate tales about her latest boyfriend's antics. After the trip, Megan's calls to my office about urgent money problems became more frequent, along with passive-aggressive texts when I couldn't answer right away. Meanwhile, my parents escalated their subtle comparisons, always praising Megan's carefree spending as living life to the fullest, while painting my financial responsibility as cold or overly serious. As October slipped into November, I found myself caught between dreading and secretly hoping for the holiday season. Despite the growing tension, I had already bought thoughtful gifts for everyone and was mentally preparing for the usual dance of balancing boundaries with the need for family connection. But I had no idea this Christmas would shatter everything in the most painful way. The truth hit me on December 15th, a day that started like any other. During my lunch break, I was scrolling through Instagram when I froze. There was a post from my cousin Julia showing a smiling crowd gathered around a beautifully decorated Christmas tree at my parents' house. The caption read, "Reynolds Family Christmas 2024. So grateful to have everyone together. Everyone, except me." I stared at the screen, my mind struggling to process the scene before me. There was Dad carving a turkey, Mom bustling around with presents, Megan laughing with aunts and uncles, cousins, grandparents, even distant relatives I barely recognized. All of them smiling, all of them there, except me. A hollow ache filled my chest as I scrolled through more photos. Cozy living room scenes, shared meals, holiday toasts. Not a single mention that I existed, let alone was welcome. The sting wasn't just about being excluded. It was the cruel contrast to the invoice I'd received days earlier. A bill for $52,000, demanding I cover the cost of Megan's brand new luxury SUV. I sat back in my chair, the weight of years of manipulation settling heavily on my shoulders. This wasn't family. It was a business transaction masked by smiles and holiday cheer. That day marked the turning point. I realized I could no longer ignore the imbalance or carry their financial burdens to be accepted. It was time to reclaim my life, my money, and my dignity. Everyone was there. The celebration had apparently taken place the previous weekend, and not once had I received a text or call. My hands trembled as I dialed my mother's number. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice overly cheerful. "Claire, darling, how are you?" she said with practiced sweetness. "Mom, why wasn't I invited to the Reynolds family Christmas last weekend?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady despite the hurt I felt. There was a pause on the other end. "Oh, well, it was so last minute, sweetheart. We knew you're always so busy with work, and Megan told me you said you had other plans," she replied smoothly. "I never told Megan that," I said firmly. Mom sighed dramatically. "Claire, please don't start. It was just a casual get-together, nothing formal. You know how Megan gets when she feels overshadowed by you. She's dealing with a lot right now, and we didn't want any tension. You understand, don't you? You've always been our strong girl." Being the strong girl was code for the one they could ignore without consequence. Before I could respond, she added, "We'll see you on Christmas Day for the real celebration." The invitation felt more like a grudging afterthought, an apology in the form of an obligation. Later that evening, Megan bombarded me with texts. "Sorry you missed the party. Was it fun?" she asked sarcastically. "Mom said you were busy anyway. By the way, can you help me pick out Mom's gift? I'm thinking jewelry, but need your expert dollar opinion. LOL. There was no acknowledgement of the exclusion, no genuine apology, just another thinly veiled demand for money disguised as sisterly bonding. That night, I lay awake, the memories flooding back. The family vacation to Miami I only discovered through Facebook photos. My college graduation dinner, where everyone arrived 3 hours late because Megan had a minor car accident that required immediate family attention. The promotion party I had to cut short because Megan was crying over a breakup and needed support. By morning, I had made my decision. I texted my mother, "I won't be joining you for Christmas Day this year. I've made other plans." Her reply came instantly. "Family," she wrote. The word felt hollow. It had lost all meaning in my world. I didn't respond. Instead, I called my friend Leah, who had been inviting me to her family's holiday celebrations for years. Leah's parents were different. Unlike my biological family, they treated me with warmth and genuine interest whenever I visited. They asked about my work and listened without judgment. They remembered the small details of my life without tallying what I could do for them. "Of course you can join us," Leah said immediately. "Mom always sets a place for you." That simple acceptance filled a space in my heart that had long been empty. As I hung up, I realized that sometimes family isn't who you're born to, but who chooses to embrace you with kindness and respect. This Christmas, I would finally experience that. You're family to us, Claire. The contrast between this immediate acceptance and the cold calculation of my own family's exclusion brought tears to my eyes. In the days leading up to Christmas, I poured my energy into helping create new traditions. I joined Leah's family as they decorated their towering pine tree, stringing lights and hanging ornaments passed down through generations. I baked dozens of cookies following Leah's grandmother's cherished recipes: sugar cookies with colorful sprinkles, rich gingerbread men, and buttery shortbread. I carefully wrapped thoughtful gifts for people who genuinely appreciated the meaning behind them, not just the price tag. For the first time in years, I felt the real warmth the holidays were meant to bring, the kind that fills the soul, not just the calendar. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed incessantly with messages from my biological family, each one more manipulative than the last. Dad called, his voice heavy with false sorrow. "You're breaking your mother's heart, Claire." Megan vacillated between guilt trips and demands for advice on her latest shopping spree. Relatives I rarely heard from throughout the year suddenly had strong opinions on my selfish decision to stay away. The only message that felt genuine came from my Aunt Elaine, my father's sister, someone who had long felt like an outsider herself. "I heard you're not coming home for Christmas," she said when I answered her call. "Smart girl. Just wanted you to know that the so-called casual gathering was actually planned 3 months ago." I felt the sting of confirmation. My family's deliberate exclusion cut deep, but Elaine's candor brought clarity. She went on, her voice low. "Jessica totaled her car last month, drove straight into a ditch after one of her wild nights. Your parents have been scrambling to get her a replacement without dipping into their renovation fund for the Hamptons house." I thanked Aunt Elaine for her honesty and tried to push that information from my mind. I was determined to savor a peaceful Christmas with people who truly wanted me there. Christmas Day with Leah's family was everything I hadn't realized I was missing. We ate far too much, played competitive board games, and shared stories freely, without agendas or judgment. No one kept score of gifts or commented on my career choices. When Leah's father raised his glass and toasted to family, both born and chosen, I felt a profound sense of belonging I hadn't experienced in years. I returned to my apartment that evening with leftover pie, warm hugs, and an invitation to their New Year's celebration. For the first time in a long while, I didn't reach for my phone, waiting for a text or call from my biological family. I was learning that family should enrich your life, not drain it. Little did I know that my journey to this understanding was about to accelerate in the most unexpected way. January arrived with New York's familiar post-holiday gloom. Gray skies, melting snow piles, and the dull ache of returning to routine after festive celebrations. I buried myself in work, finding comfort in numbers and spreadsheets, things that made sense, unlike family dynamics. 3 weeks after Christmas, I was beginning to feel more like myself. The sting of exclusion had faded into a dull ache, and I was focused on new goals, setting firm boundaries, nurturing genuine relationships, and finally enrolling in that financial certification course I had long postponed. Then, One afternoon, the envelope arrived. It was a chilly Thursday evening in early February when I gathered my mail from the building lobby. Amid the usual assortment of bills and flyers, one thick manila envelope stood out. It bore my parents' return address, handwritten in my mother Caroline's elegant script. No card, no note, just my name and address on the front. Curious and slightly apprehensive, I slipped the envelope into my bag as the elevator carried me up to my apartment. Once inside, I quickly tore it open. The first thing I saw was a stack of papers. The top page was an invoice for $52,000 from Westchester Luxury Motors. The purchaser's name was Megan Reynolds. The co-signer, Claire Reynolds. I nearly dropped the papers in disbelief. Below the invoice, I found loan documents for a brand new Mercedes GLE Coupe. The contract showed monthly payments of $1,138 for 60 months. And there, in the co-signer section, was my signature. Except I had never signed anything like this. My hands shook as I fumbled with my keys, barely making it inside before collapsing onto my couch. I sifted through the rest of the paperwork, insurance forms, extended warranty details, and then a casually written note from Megan herself. Thanks for helping with the new car. The old one was totaled, and I needed something reliable. Mom and Dad said you'd understand since you're doing so well. Payment details attached. First one due February 1st. Love you, sis. XOXO. The entitlement in her words churned my stomach. I grabbed my phone and called my parents immediately, heart hammering. My father answered on the second ring. Claire, did you get the paperwork we sent? Dad, what is this? I never agreed to co-sign for Megan's car, I said, voice tight. That's not my signature, I added, feeling a rising panic. Now, Claire, Dad said in that condescending tone he'd perfected over the years, don't be dramatic. We knew you'd want to help your sister. She's been through a lot with the accident. The accident that was her fault because she was driving drunk? I countered sharply, remembering Aunt Elaine's earlier revelation. That's beside the point. She needs a car for her new job, Dad said. What new job? Megan hasn't held steady employment in years. She has an interview next week, Dad admitted reluctantly. But she needs to make a good impression. The Mercedes will help with that. The absurdity would have been laughable if it weren't so infuriating. Dad, someone forged my signature. This is fraud. I never agreed to this, I insisted. Your mother signed for you, he said dismissively. We knew you'd be difficult about it. But family helps family. I sat back, my head spinning. How could they assume my mother had the right to sign my name without permission? And why had they banked on my sense of obligation to cover this huge expense without so much as a discussion? My trust had been shattered, replaced by a cold business transaction disguised as family support. That night, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't let their manipulations define me any longer. No more silent sacrifices, no more being the family's ATM. It was time to take back control of my life and my finances before this toxic cycle consumed me entirely. You make more than enough to cover the payments. I was speechless. The casual admission of fraud, the assumption that my income was theirs to allocate, and the complete disregard for my autonomy, it was breathtaking in its audacity. This is illegal, I finally managed to say. I'm not paying for Megan's car. Don't be selfish, Claire, after everything we've done for you. I hung up the phone, my chest tight with anger. Within minutes, my phone buzzed relentlessly with texts from Megan. Dad says you're being difficult about the car. I need this car, Claire. You're so selfish. You don't even drive a Mercedes. Why do you care? If you don't help me, I'll be stranded. Each message deepened my disbelief and hurt. I turned off my phone and poured myself a generous glass of wine, struggling to process what had just happened. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in nearly 3 years. I needed time to understand the full scope of what I was facing. A quick online search confirmed my worst fears. If my name had been fraudulently added as a co-signer, I could still be held liable for the loan unless I reported the fraud immediately. With growing unease, I logged into my bank accounts to check for any unauthorized activity. What I found sent a cold chill down my spine. Someone had tried to access my primary savings account the day before, the account where I kept my emergency fund and savings for a future home. Thankfully, the bank's security system had flagged the unusual activity and frozen the account pending verification. When I called the bank, they confirmed the attempt came from a recognized device. My old laptop, the one I had given to my parents last year after upgrading. The sense of violation was overwhelming. While I was grappling with the car loan fraud, they had actually tried to access my savings directly. This wasn't entitlement. It was calculated theft. That afternoon, an email arrived from my mother. Claire, your father is very disappointed in your reaction. Megan is heartbroken that you would abandon her in her time of need. As your mother, I must say, I raised you better than this. Family stands together, the car has already been purchased, and Megan loves it. Don't ruin this for her. She plans to post about it on Instagram this weekend and wants to thank you publicly for your generosity. Please don't embarrass her by creating drama. The email perfectly encapsulated the toxic family dynamic. My feelings didn't matter. Megan's were paramount, and my worth was measured only by what I could provide. The mention of social media was especially telling. Appearances mattered more than ethics or legality. By the end of the day, my shock had hardened into something else. Determination. I realized I couldn't continue being a silent victim to their manipulation. This wasn't just a financial betrayal, it was a fundamental violation of trust and respect. I knew I had to act quickly to protect myself, my finances, and my future. This fight was no longer about a car or money. It was about reclaiming my dignity and breaking free from a family that had long since stopped seeing me as anything more than a bank account. For the first time, I saw my family's behavior with perfect clarity. This wasn't love. This wasn't even family. This was exploitation, and it had gone on long enough. I made an appointment with a lawyer for the very next day. Then I called Aunt Elaine. "I'm not surprised," she said with a tired sigh after I explained everything. "They did something similar with your cousin Ryan a few years ago, one of those timeshare scams. He ended up paying rather than fighting it. They're counting on you doing the same," she added. "Not this time," I said firmly, surprising even myself with the strength in my voice. "Not anymore." The lawyer's office was tucked inside a converted brownstone in Midtown Manhattan, cozy and warm against the biting January chill outside. Natalie Hoffman, the attorney Leah had recommended, studied the documents with a practiced eye. Her expression darkened with concern as she read. "This is textbook fraud," she said, finally removing her reading glasses. "Your mother forged your signature on a legally binding financial document. The fact that she's your mother doesn't make it any less criminal." "What are my options?" I asked, clutching my coffee cup, hoping for some good news. Natalie was candid. "You have several, none of them easy. You can report the fraud to the police. That will likely lead to criminal charges against your mother. Or you can report it to the bank and dealership as fraud, but without pressing charges. They might still take action on their own. Or," she said, her voice low, "you can pay for a car you never agreed to buy." Hearing it laid out so plainly made the choice clear. Yet decades of conditioning, years of being told to keep the peace, to sacrifice, made me hesitate. "If I report the fraud," I asked, "what happens to the car?" "Most likely it will be repossessed, unless your sister or parents can qualify for the loan without you. Given what you've told me about their finances, that seems unlikely." I nodded, absorbing the reality. "And my relationship with my family?" I asked, voice barely a whisper. Natalie gave me a sympathetic look. "I can't advise on that, but ask yourself, what kind of relationship do you have with people who would commit fraud against you?" It was a fair question, and one that haunted me as I left her office with a clear legal plan, but a storm of emotion swirling inside. When I turned my phone back on, I was greeted by 17 missed calls and 36 text messages. My father's tone had escalated into threats. "If you pursue this fraud nonsense, consider yourself cut off from this family. For good. Your mother is beside herself, devastated by your ingratitude." Megan's messages shifted between fury and manipulation. "I already showed everyone my new car. How could you do this to me? I told you about the job interview. I need to make a good impression. Remember when I covered for you after you crashed Dad's boat? You owe me. The barrage was relentless, but beneath it all, I heard the fear of exposure, fear of losing control. For the first time, I wasn't willing to be their pawn anymore. I was done being their bank, their scapegoat, their emotional punching bag. This fight was about my dignity, my future, and finally reclaiming my life on my own terms. I had never crashed our father's boat. The fabricated leverage was almost impressive in its desperation. Even extended family members had been enlisted. Cousins I spoke to maybe once a year suddenly flooded my phone with messages about loyalty and standing by family in times of need. Uncle Robert, Dad's brother and business partner, even called. His tone was measured but firm. He reminded me that family disputes should stay private and suggested I was being overly legalistic about what he called a simple misunderstanding. The coordinated pressure only strengthened my resolve. I forwarded every message and call log to Natalie and followed her advice to document all communications while keeping my responses minimal and factual. That evening, my boss, Sandra, called me. I'd returned to work, but couldn't shake the distraction. My usual focus and precision were noticeably absent. "Claire, is everything all right?" she asked gently. "The Wellington presentation today seemed off, and that's not like you." I hesitated, then chose honesty. "I'm dealing with a family situation. My parents forged my signature on a car loan for my sister. I'm working with a lawyer." There was a long pause on the other end. "I see," Sandra finally said. "That's significant. Do you need some time off?" "No," I replied quickly. "Work actually helps me stay grounded, but I might need a flexible schedule for legal appointments." "Of course," she said warmly. "And, Claire, don't let anyone take advantage of you, family or otherwise. I learned that lesson the hard way." Her unexpected support was a stark contrast to my family's behavior and reinforced what I was slowly learning. Respect isn't determined by blood. 2 days later, I discovered someone had tried to access my investment accounts. The attempt failed thanks to two-factor authentication, but the pattern was clear. I immediately changed all my passwords and security questions, removing any information my family might know. Then my mother called. "Claire Elizabeth Reynolds," she began, using my full name as she always did when layering on guilt. "We need to discuss this car situation like adults. Your father and I are hosting dinner tomorrow night. Megan will be there. We expect you at 7. It wasn't an invitation. It was a summons. In the past, I would have dropped everything to comply, eager for any chance to earn their approval. This time, I agreed for entirely different reasons. I needed to set firm boundaries face to face. The next evening, I arrived at my parents' house precisely on time. The familiar colonial stood as always, pristine, imposing, but utterly cold. Through the front window, I spotted Megan's new Mercedes, gleaming in the driveway, parked prominently. Meanwhile, my parents' vehicles were tucked away discreetly in the garage. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, ready to face the family who had so long ignored my worth beyond what I could provide. If you're moved by Claire's journey and want to see how she takes back control, hit that subscribe button and join us, because the next chapter is where everything changes. The door opened, and my mother greeted me with an air kiss that barely touched my cheek. Polite, but distant. She stepped aside, saying with forced calm, "Come in, Claire. Let's talk." She led me to the dining room where my father and Megan were already seated. Megan barely glanced up from her phone as I entered, scrolling distractedly. My father stood near the fireplace, holding a glass of whiskey, his expression carefully rehearsed, equal parts disappointment and control. "Have a seat, Claire," he said, motioning toward the chair opposite Megan. "Your mother prepared your favorite meal." In truth, the beef stroganoff on the table was Megan's favorite. I had disliked it since I was a child, a fact they conveniently chose to forget. Before I could respond, my father began. "We are deeply disappointed in how you've handled this situation. Hiring a lawyer, threatening fraud charges. This isn't how our family solves problems." "How does our family operate, Dad?" I asked quietly, but firmly. "By forging signatures? By trying to drain my savings? By excluding me from family events and then expecting me to bankroll Megan's lifestyle?" Megan slammed her fork onto the table. Oh my God, are you still whining about Christmas? It was just a small get-together. Our entire extended family was there. Everyone but me, I said, because you're so judgmental. You make everyone uncomfortable with your perfect job, your perfect apartment, and your constant criticism of my choices. Megan spat. My mother placed a gentle hand on Megan's arm. Claire, you know your sister is sensitive. You've always been jealous of her. And honestly, it's unbecoming for a woman your age. The familiar script unfolded exactly as expected. Megan the victim, Claire the villain, and reality nowhere in sight. I'm not paying for that car, I said firmly. What you did is illegal, I continued. I've frozen all my accounts you might have access to, and I've documented every attempt to defraud me. My father's face darkened. After everything we've done for you, he said, voice tight. I cut in, surprising even myself. What exactly have I done for you? I earned my scholarships. I paid off my student loans. I built my career through hard work and discipline. Meanwhile, you've enabled Megan through multiple failed college programs, bailed her out of credit card debt, and now committed fraud to buy her a luxury car she can't afford. We raised you, my mother snapped. We gave you a home, an education, opportunities. That's literally the minimum legal requirement of parenthood, I replied. And you've been making me pay for it ever since, as if I should be eternally grateful for basic responsibilities. Megan, quick to escalate, suddenly stood, knocking over her chair. You think you're better than everyone, she hissed. Newsflash, Claire, nobody likes you. Even your boyfriend left you because you're cold and calculating. I blinked, stunned. The truth was far different. My ex had left me, but not because of me. He'd been cheating with Megan. The room fell silent, tension thick and unbearable. For the first time, the facade cracked, revealing the painful truth beneath years of lies and betrayal, a fact they didn't realize I already knew. The casual cruelty was striking. These people weren't just exploiting me financially. They actively disliked me, yet still expected me to bankroll their lives. If you don't pay for this car, my father said quietly, voice low and dangerous, you're no longer part of this family. No holidays, no inheritance, no connection to the Reynolds name. The threat, which once would have crushed me, now felt strangely freeing. You want me to choose between $52,000 for a car I never agreed to buy and a family that commits fraud against me, tries to steal from me, and treats me with constant disrespect? I stood up, carefully placing my napkin beside my untouched plate. That's not a difficult choice. As I headed for the door, my mother called after me, voice sharp with desperation. Megan needs that car. What's she supposed to do without it? I turned back, steady and firm. The same thing I did when I needed a car she can actually afford. The drive home was a blur, adrenaline rushing through my veins. I had finally spoken truths I'd held inside for years. The relief was tangible, but so was the ache. I had just lost my family, or perhaps finally acknowledged a loss that had come long before. The days after that dinner brought unexpected clarity. Instead of the crushing guilt I'd braced for, I felt lighter, as though I'd set down a weight I'd carried for decades. Still, doubts whispered in the quiet moments. Was I overreacting? Was family loyalty more important than self-respect? Had I permanently damaged relationships that deserved saving? These questions haunted me through sleepless nights and distracted days at work. I began seeing a therapist, Dr. Laura Kim, who specialized in family trauma. During our second session, she asked a question that stopped me cold. Claire, if a friend told you this story about their family, what would you advise? The answer was instant. Run. Never look back. Then why is it different when it's your own family? I had no answer. Meanwhile, my family escalated their campaign. Megan flooded social media with photos of herself beside the Mercedes, tagging me with captions like, "Best sister ever," "Blessed," "Family support," and "When your sister knows you deserve luxury," followed by "Sibling love." The deliberate public narrative was clear. If I reported the fraud, I would be the villain who'd taken Megan's prized possession out of spite. My parents' approach was more direct. They began contacting my friends and colleagues, spinning versions of the story that painted me as unstable and ungrateful. Several coworkers mentioned receiving concerned calls from my mother about my mental state and financial confusion. My father even called Sandra, my boss, questioning whether I was capable of managing client funds given my emotional problems tied to family financial disputes. Fortunately, Sandra saw through the manipulation. She stood by me. That support became a lifeline amid the storm of lies and betrayal. It was the first real sign that my new path, though lonely and painful, was the right one. "Your father called me today," Sandra said quietly during our weekly check-in. "I've never heard such blatant damage control in my life, and I work closely with crisis PR firms regularly." The invasion into my professional world crossed yet another line. That very evening, I met with Marcus, my trusted financial advisor, to ensure every asset was securely protected. "Based on what you've told me," Marcus said, "I recommend setting up a complete financial firewall. New accounts at different institutions, updated beneficiaries on all policies, and a thorough credit check to catch any other surprises," he explained. The credit check unearthed another shock: an application for a store credit card in my name from a high-end furniture retailer, submitted just 2 days after the car purchase. Thankfully, the application was rejected due to the fraud alert I'd placed. But the attempt itself was deeply telling. This wasn't just about Megan's car. It was the start of what could have been systematic financial exploitation. As January slipped into February, Megan's social media campaign took a darker, more aggressive turn. She began posting cryptic messages about toxic family members who pretend to support you and recognizing narcissists in your life. The projection was almost impressive in its intensity. One post, in particular, caught my attention. A selfie of Megan standing in front of the Mercedes, captioned, "Some people would rather destroy what you love than see you happy. Stay strong against the haters, even when they're family." The comments flooded in, filled with sympathetic messages from relatives and friends unaware of the real story. Cousin Julia, the same one who'd shared photos from the Christmas gathering, commented, "Blood doesn't always mean love. Setting boundaries is self-care." The irony was almost too much to bear. That night, I received a text that finally broke through any remaining doubt. Megan, apparently drunk judging by the typos and late timestamp, sent, "You think you're so much better than everyone, but you're just a lonely bee with no one who loves you. Mom and Dad only put up with you because you're money. We all laugh at you behind your back. Enjoy your empty apartment while I enjoy my car." I stared at the message long after the screen went dark, a strange calm settling over me. The raw honesty of that drunken text confirmed everything I'd suspected. My family didn't love me. They only tolerated me for what I could provide. The realization should have crushed me, but instead, it felt like permission, a release to finally let go. The next morning, with clarity and zero hesitation, I called Natalie Hoffman. "I'm ready to proceed with reporting the fraud," I told her. "All of it." "Are you sure?" she asked gently. "Once we start, it will be difficult to reverse." "I'm sure," I said firmly. "They've left me no choice." Then, I called the bank that had financed Megan's Mercedes. "My name is Claire Reynolds," I said when I reached the fraud department. "I need to report a forged signature on an auto loan." The representative asked a series of verification questions before transferring me to a manager named Robert. His voice was calm, professional, and empathetic as he walked me through the next steps. "I understand this must be difficult, Ms. Reynolds," Robert said. "Family fraud is unfortunately more common than people realize, but reporting it takes courage." "What happens now?" I asked, steady despite the knot tightening in my stomach. "We'll conduct a thorough investigation, which usually takes 5 to 7 business days. If we confirm the fraud, as seems likely based on what you've shared, the loan will be removed from your name and credit report." "And the car?" I pressed. "The lender will take appropriate action regarding the vehicle, most likely repossession." "Unless the other party can qualify for the loan independently?" "Yes." I knew Megan couldn't. Her credit was wrecked after years of missed payments and maxed out cards. My parents might have the means to make payments, but taking on the debt themselves would defeat their purpose of putting it in my name. I understand. Please proceed, I said firmly. After hanging up, I sat quietly in my apartment, the weight of my decision settling heavily around me. I had just set in motion a process that would probably lead to Megan losing her car and possibly criminal charges against my mother for fraud. The family I thought I had was irrevocably broken. Yet alongside the grief, there was an unexpected strength. For the first time, I had stood up for myself against those who had exploited me for years. The cost was high, but the alternative, remaining their financial and emotional hostage, was no longer acceptable. I grabbed my phone and texted Leah. I did it. I reported the fraud. Her reply was instant. I'm so proud of you. Want to come over for dinner? Dad's making his famous lasagna. Tears welled up, and I smiled through them. Real family was still possible, just not with the ones who shared my DNA. The bank moved faster than I anticipated. Just 3 days after my report, Robert called back. Ms. Reynolds, our investigation confirms your signature was forged on the loan documents. We've removed the loan from your credit report and financial responsibility. We are proceeding with repossession of the vehicle. How soon will that happen? I asked, my stomach twisting despite my conviction. The repossession agent has been assigned. It could be today or tomorrow. We don't provide specific timing for obvious reasons. The certainty of action was both terrifying and relieving. I knew the coming days would be hard. There would be backlash, confrontation, and more pain. But I was ready. For the first time, I was choosing myself. I thanked Robert and hung up, bracing myself for the fallout. But it came faster than I expected. Less than 2 hours later, my phone blew up with notifications. Megan was calling over and over, leaving frantic voicemails between a flood of texts. They took my car. How could you do this to me? I'm stranded at the mall. You ruined my life. I didn't respond. Instead, I blocked her number, something I should have done weeks ago. Next came my parents. My father's voice, usually so controlled, trembled with rage in his voicemail. What you've done is unforgivable. Your mother is in tears. Megan is devastated. I never thought my own daughter could be so vindictive and cruel. Don't bother calling back. You're no longer welcome in this house. I blocked their numbers too. Then, methodically, I went through my contacts, blocking every family member who might be their proxy. It felt like cutting off limbs, but also like removing a cancer. Social media turned into a battlefield. Megan posted tearful videos about her car being stolen due to family betrayal, carefully crafting a narrative casting herself as the innocent victim, conveniently omitting the fraud. Relatives and family friends flooded the comments with outrage and support, condemning the unnamed villain who'd hurt sweet Megan. I deactivated all my social accounts. The court of public opinion didn't matter. The truth did. The very next day, the other shoe dropped. My mother had been contacted by the bank's fraud department. Faced with evidence of the forgery and looming criminal charges, she was scrambling. Her lawyer reached out to Natalie, floating vague offers of family reconciliation and financial restitution. If only I would withdraw my fraud claim. They're running scared, Natalie told me. The bank has clear proof of forgery, which is a felony. They're hoping you'll back down to protect your mother from criminal charges. What do you advise? I asked. That depends on what you want, Natalie replied. If your goal is justice, we proceed. If your goal is separation with minimal conflict, we could negotiate a settlement. That would include a formal admission of wrongdoing, financial compensation for your legal fees, and legally binding agreements that they'll never try to access your finances again. I chose the latter. Not out of love. There was none left. But because I knew the family drama would never end if my mother became a martyr in Megan's cause. I wanted clean closure, not an ongoing saga. The settlement negotiations took 2 weeks. My parents, confronted with the very real possibility of criminal charges, agreed to my terms faster than I expected. They would cover all my legal fees, sign notarized admissions of the fraud, and agree to legally binding non-contact orders. In return, I would drop the criminal charges. Throughout the process, I received support from unexpected places. Aunt Elaine called first, her voice warm yet firm. "I'm proud of you, Claire. Someone needed to stand up to them. They've been pulling these stunts for years, but everyone's been too afraid of being cut off to speak up." Even more surprisingly, my cousin Ryan reached out. "I heard about the car," he said. "I went through something similar with them 3 years ago. Wish I had your courage back then." The family I'd thought was solidly against me was actually filled with silent victims of my parents' manipulation, people suffering in quiet fear. On the day the settlement was finalized, I received a text from an unknown number. It was Megan, using a friend's phone to bypass my block. "You think you've won? But you've lost everything. Enjoy your money and your empty life. We're all better off without you." Her words were meant to hurt, but they landed differently than she intended. Yes, I had lost my biological family, but what had they ever really given me besides stress, manipulation, and exploitation? The emptiness I felt wasn't from their absence. It was the realization that they had never been the loving family I'd hoped for. That evening, I met Leah and her parents for dinner. They had become my true support system throughout the ordeal, offering practical help, emotional steadiness, and no judgment. "To Claire," Leah's father toasted, raising his glass, "for having the courage to choose self-respect over appeasement. Not everyone can do that." As we shared a meal filled with genuine laughter and honest conversation, I realized I wasn't mourning the loss of family. I was grieving the illusion that I'd ever had one, and celebrating the discovery that family could be found elsewhere. 6 months passed, bringing summer heat to New York and a surprising peace to my life. The legal battle was over, the settlement enforced, and the non-contact orders holding firm. My mother had avoided criminal charges. Megan eventually secured financing for a much more modest car through my parents, and I began healing from decades of emotional manipulation. The transition wasn't easy. There were nights I woke in a panic, convinced I'd made a terrible mistake. Holidays and birthdays stirred complicated feelings. Mother's Day was especially hard. I stood in the card aisle at a drugstore, staring at messages celebrating loving mothers, feeling like an outsider watching a ritual from another world. But there were unexpected benefits to cutting toxic ties. My work performance soared when I wasn't constantly managing family crises. I found clarity in boundaries and strength in self-respect. And I slowly rebuilt a life defined not by obligation, but by choice. I received a significant promotion and a generous bonus, which I chose to invest instead of diverting toward family emergencies. My apartment, the one my mother once called depressingly small, became my peaceful sanctuary, decorated exactly as I liked. But more importantly, I discovered what genuine relationships felt like. Freed from the constant emotional drain of my biological family, I finally had the energy to nurture friendships that had withered under years of strain. I joined a local book club, started weekend hiking trips with coworkers, and even began dating again, this time setting healthier expectations and boundaries. My therapy sessions with Dr. Laura Kim continued weekly, then bi-weekly, as I built stronger coping skills. "Family trauma doesn't disappear overnight," she reminded me. "Healing isn't linear. There will be setbacks and difficult days. The goal isn't to never feel pain about your family," she said gently. "It's to process that pain in ways that don't derail your life." One unexpected part of recovery was learning to identify and challenge the distorted thinking patterns my family had instilled. I no longer felt guilty for setting boundaries. I stopped apologizing for my success. I recognized that generosity shouldn't require self-sacrifice, and love shouldn't come with invoices. In July, I received an email from Aunt Elaine. She and Uncle Martin were celebrating their 40th anniversary with a small gathering at their lake house and wanted me to attend. "No drama, no manipulation, just good food and better company," she promised. And, she added with a smile, absolutely no other Reynolds invited. Curious but cautious, I accepted. The weekend turned out to be a revelation. Aunt Elaine had always been the family rebel, maintaining her distance from my parents' materialistic values while still attending obligatory gatherings. Away from their influence, She was vibrant, funny, and surprisingly insightful. "Your mother was always like this," she said one evening as we sat on the dock watching the sunset. "Even as a teenager, she measured everything by what she could get from people. Your father was a perfect match, equally transactional, equally status-obsessed. When you were born, I hoped you'd somehow escape their influence." "I did," I said quietly. "Just took 29 years. She squeezed my hand. "Better late than never." Then came the most unexpected reconciliation. In August, my cousin Julia, the same one who'd posted the Christmas photos that exposed my exclusion, reached out via email. Unlike the rest of the family, her message contained a heartfelt apology. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened at Christmas, and everything since," she wrote. "I didn't understand the full situation then, but I've seen how Aunt Caroline and Uncle Thomas have been rewriting history. It's opened my eyes to patterns I never noticed before. I'm sorry I participated in hurting you." Her words were a balm to a wound I hadn't known was healing. For the first time, the possibility of a chosen family felt real, a future built not on blood, but on trust and respect. "If you're open to it, I'd like to reconnect on your terms." "No pressure," Julia had said in her email. We met for coffee at a quiet cafe halfway between our neighborhoods, a neutral ground. The conversation was awkward at first, stilted by years of silence and unspoken grievances, but gradually, as we shared our experiences with the Reynolds family dynamic, the warmth returned. Julia revealed that since my departure, Megan had grown increasingly demanding, and my parents had become even more manipulative with other relatives. "It's like they need someone to use," she observed. "When you left, they just redirected their control to others." I felt a pang of guilt, quickly followed by clarity. I wasn't responsible for shielding others from my parents' toxic behavior. Each person had to recognize the pattern and make their own choices. Julia and I agreed to proceed cautiously in rebuilding our relationship. No family gossip, no pressure to attend gatherings where my parents would be present, just occasional meetups between two adults sharing a complicated history. By fall, I had carved out a new normal. My finances were completely secured, my career was thriving, and my social circle consisted of people who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. I still had moments of sadness over what my family relationship could have been, but those feelings no longer dominated my emotional landscape. In October, exactly 1 year after my ill-fated attempt to repair family ties with the Manhattan weekend, I received a text from Megan. Despite the non-contact order, she had found a way to reach me through a colleague's phone. "I hate what you did, but I get it now," she wrote. "Dad and Mom have put me in charge of Thanksgiving and expect me to pay for everything. When I said I couldn't afford it, Dad suggested I borrow from my 401k. I remembered what you said about buying only what I can actually afford. You were right. Don't respond to this. I'll deny everything if they find out I contacted you. Just wanted you to know." I didn't reply but saved the message. It wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement. Megan was beginning to see the pattern, though whether she would break free remained her choice. As the holiday season approached again, I reflected on all I had learned. The car invoice that once felt like the worst crisis of my life had been a gift. The final push I needed to recognize and escape a lifetime of exploitation disguised as family love. I had learned that family isn't defined by DNA, but by mutual respect, genuine support, and love that doesn't come with conditions or receipts. I discovered that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's essential for healthy relationships. Most importantly, I realized that walking away from toxic connections isn't failure. Sometimes it's the bravest form of self-respect. This Christmas would be different. I had accepted Leah's invitation to join her family at their cabin in Vermont. I had a new tradition of volunteering at a local shelter on Christmas Eve, and plans to celebrate New Year's with colleagues who had become true friends. My life wasn't empty without my biological family. It was fuller, healthier, and infinitely more peaceful. The journey hadn't been easy, and it wasn't completely over. I would always carry the scars of my upbringing, the whispers of self-doubt, the reflexive guilt. But now, I recognize those thoughts as echoes, not the truth. If you followed my journey this far, thank you for being here with me. It hasn't been easy sharing such personal struggles, but I hope my story reminds you that no one should feel trapped or diminished by the family they were born into. Sometimes, the hardest and bravest step is choosing yourself over toxic ties, even when it means walking away from people who should have loved you unconditionally. I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family or loved ones? What helped you find the strength to stand up for yourself? Drop a comment below and share your story or words of encouragement, not just for me, but for others who might be struggling in silence. Your voice matters, and together we can build a community that supports healing and self-respect. One of the biggest lessons I've learned is that family isn't defined by blood, but by respect, kindness, and support. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's essential for protecting your well-being and creating space for genuine relationships. If you're feeling overwhelmed or manipulated, remember that it's okay to say no. You deserve peace, love, and people who celebrate your success without strings attached. Take time to invest in yourself, whether through therapy, friendships, or simply finding moments of joy outside of family expectations. Healing isn't linear, so be patient with yourself and don't let guilt hold you back from building a life that feels right to you. You're worth it. If my story has touched you, please subscribe to this channel. More stories of courage, resilience, and transformation are coming your way, and I'd love to have you along for the journey. Thank you for your support. It means everything.